In 2001, the South Dakota Supreme Court adopted rules for procedure for expanded media coverage of the Supreme Court proceedings. The pilot project became permanent in 2003, and televised and still camera coverage is permitted in all judicial proceedings of the Supreme Court courtroom while this court is in session. Since 2001, the subject of similar coverage of trial proceedings has been informally discussed. A legislative statute, however, prohibited the taking of photographs and radio and television broadcasting of judicial proceedings from a trial courtroom, so that in reality there was little to talk about or debate. However, this year the legislature repealed this prohibition, and this repealer will go into effect July 1st, 2008. Supreme Court rules, however, also currently prohibit the broadcasting, televising, recording, or photographing of trial court proceedings. With the legislative prohibition now lifted, the issue of whether the Supreme Court should reconsider its prohibition is now proper for study. With that in mind, the South Dakota Supreme Court has authorized the creation of a Supreme Court committee concerning media to study the issue. A major part of its task will be to look at what is being done in the other 49 states, the federal courts, the District of Columbia, and the territories such as Puerto Rico. The committee will consider the factors of importance that are involved in trial courts, but which do not exist in cases before the Supreme Court. For example, trial court proceedings involve the daily participation of laypersons who may be jurors, witnesses, parties to the proceedings, and victims. The committee will examine the effect of cameras in the courtroom on these groups. The committee will be chaired by the Honorable Robert A. Miller, who was Chief Justice at the time that the issue of cameras in the Supreme Court was studied by this court. Representatives from the diverse groups who directly participate in the operation of the trial courts have agreed to serve on a committee and examine the issue. The other committee members are the Honorable Jack Von Wald, Aberdeen, presiding circuit judge, who will also vice chair of the committee. The Honorable David Gienap, presiding circuit judge from Brookings. The Honorable Glenn Severson, presiding circuit judge from Sioux Falls. Bob Wilcox from Pierre, executive director of the South Dakota Association of County Commissioners. And perhaps a word of explanation is in order here. The counties own and maintain the courthouses, even though they're called a courthouse. It is county property. The media will be represented by Tina Haraldson of Sioux Falls, bureau chief of the Associated Press for North Dakota, South Dakota, and Nebraska. Also Mark Roby of Watertown, publisher of the Watertown Public Opinion. Mark Millage, currently Kelland News Director and South Dakota Supreme Court Media Coordinator, and soon to be president of Killian Community College. And John Peterson of Rapid City, who is the news director of KOTA-TV. The South Dakota Bar will be represented by Richard Travis of Sioux Falls, who is president of the State Bar, and Roxanne Geed of Pierre, who is the president-elect of the State Bar. Prosecutors will be represented by the Honorable Larry Long, Pierre, Attorney General of the State of South Dakota, and David Nelson of Sioux Falls, who is the Minnehaha County State's Attorney. Criminal Defense Bar will be represented by Tim Wrench of Rapid City and Jeff Larson of Sioux Falls. Law enforcement, which provides security for the courts, will be represented by Sheriff Don Holloway of Rapid City, who is the Pennington County Sheriff, and Sheriff David Hunhoff of Yankton, who is the Yankton County Sheriff. Victims' rights will be represented by Cheryl Hanna of Rapid City, who is the Director of Access to Justice, and Denise Richards of Pierre, who is the Hughes County Victims Assistant. Academia will be represented by Professor Chris Hutton of Vermillion, who is a professor of law at the University of South Dakota School of Law. The Unified Judicial System will be represented by Carl Fonis of Sioux Falls, who is the Circuit Administrator of the Second Judicial Circuit, and also Judith Roberts of Pierre, who is the Unified Judicial System Administrative Counsel and Press Relations Officer. The Supreme Court is interested in a thorough study of this important subject matter. As such, we've indicated to Chairman Miller that no exact date exists for the completion of the committee's work. We want a thorough job, not a quick one. The committee will draft an advisory report to the Supreme Court with its recommendations. After receiving the report, the Supreme Court may choose to consider changes in its current rules. Before any changes are considered, a public hearing will be held for input by interested persons and the public. Are there any questions?
You say there's no exact date, but you anticipate this lasting months or years?
Well, you've got 54 jurisdictions plus the federal courts, and some states have more than one system. So if you're going to do a thorough job, that may require inviting judges to come to South Dakota that are familiar with their systems, or sending some of our people out to look at what the other states do. You just don't do that with a snap of your fingers. So we want a thorough study, and so I think it's speculation. Know how long it would take. These are, when you look at names like this on this committee, these are very busy people, and so we're looking for a thorough job. The pilot project in the Supreme Court took 2 years until it became permanent, although at that time, during the pilot project, we had changed the rules so that the cameras were running. Other questions?
Chief Justice, regarding all the groups that you've got in here, do you think that there'll probably be, do you think that there'll be unanimity for it at this project at the end or not?
I have no way of knowing, Tony. It's nice to have one report, but it's very possible with that number of options out there. For example, some states allow you to allow the press in if everybody agrees. Other states allow press access pretty much at will, so there's a huge difference between those two systems. And the difference is the amount of access the press gets. And so you may have some of the committee thinking that this system's the best, other members thinking another one is, and some maybe opting for what we've got now. We'll see. Well, we sat down and tried to figure out who all the major players were in a trial, and that is why I listed who they represented: the bar, the defense counsel, the judges, the counties, the law enforcement. And then we tried to get a cross-section from across the state, so it wasn't just from one geographical area. And then people, obviously, who are leaders in their fields. So, and you could put more. There's a lot of people that are qualified that aren't on this list, but you're looking at about 20 people right now. And if it gets much larger, a study group probably becomes unmanageable.
Are they going to be working independently, or how is the committee work?
That's up to them. I assume they'll work as a group, but obviously they can operate any way they want to.
Mr. Chief Justice, you said it took 2 years to get this completed for the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
Do you sense it might take longer given the different groups and more complexity? Is it going to be more complex, you think, doing this issue than it was with the Supreme Court?
It's probably just speculation at this point, Tony, to even guess. In my own mind, if it takes them 2 years, when you've got 55 different jurisdictions to look at, and we'll just have to see. But you want to do it right if you're going to do it.
Do you anticipate when the report is finished that cameras will be in the trial court in some way or another?
That'll be up to the Supreme Court. I'm only 1 vote out of 5, and it would be really speculative. You would need the group, if I'm guessing now. We'll wait to see what they have to report to us. I would point out that the Supreme Court judges do have experience in the trial court. All 5 of us were trial lawyers at one time, and 4 of us were trial judges. So we're familiar with the territory. Go ahead. We're hoping for early summer. We want to do some preliminary work as far as getting materials together so that we are not just wasting our time to ask them to come up here for a get acquainted session. We want to hit the ground running.
What are your personal feelings on it?
No comment at this time.
How does the Supreme Court's camera system work?
It's worked very well. We've had no problems at all. And not only have we done it in here in the courtroom, In March, we go to the law school at Vermillion, and then in October, we'll go to another town, generally a college town. This year, we'll be at SDSU. We've been